What if I told you that the greatest threat to your future is not ignorance, but the stories you believe without questioning? Every war, every empire, every financial bubble, every cult, and almost every personal failure began with one simple lie that enough people accepted as truth. The shocking part isn't that humans lie. The shocking part is that the human brain is naturally designed to believe comforting stories before uncomfortable facts. Truth demands evidence. Lies demand emotion. And emotion almost always wins. Today, you'll discover why your brain does this, how evolution programmed it, and, most importantly, how to escape the mental prison that traps millions of people for their entire lives. Most people believe that the purpose of the human brain is to discover the truth. It sounds obvious. We admire scientists for uncovering reality, judges for seeking facts, and philosophers for questioning assumptions. From childhood, we are taught that intelligence means recognizing what is true and rejecting what is false. Yet if we step back and examine the long history of our species, a different picture begins to emerge. For almost all of human existence, survival depended far less on perfect knowledge than on making decisions quickly enough to stay alive. Imagine a human living 70,000 years ago. Every sound in the darkness could signal danger. Every unfamiliar face might represent either an opportunity or a threat. Waiting for complete evidence was often a luxury that evolution could not afford. Those who hesitated too long frequently disappeared from the genetic record. Those who reacted immediately, even if they were occasionally wrong, were more likely to survive and pass their instincts to future generations. Natural selection never promised to create a brain that sees reality perfectly. It only favored a brain that improved the odds of survival and reproduction. These are not the same objective. Reality is incredibly complex. Processing every detail with complete accuracy would require enormous amounts of time and energy. Evolution solved this problem not by creating perfect thinkers, but by creating efficient thinkers. The human brain became a prediction machine, constantly filling in missing information, relying on shortcuts, and making rapid judgments before conscious reasoning could even begin. This is why perception is never a passive recording of the outside world. Every moment, your brain is constructing an interpretation. It combines sensory information with memories, expectations, emotions, and previous experiences to produce what feels like reality. The result is remarkably useful, but it is not an objective mirror of the world. It is a carefully edited version designed to help you function. Consider how quickly you recognize a face in a crowd. You do not consciously analyze every feature before deciding who the person is. Your brain performs thousands of calculations in fractions of a second. Most of the time, this remarkable efficiency serves you well. But the same mechanism also creates false memories, mistaken assumptions, and powerful illusions. The brain is optimized for speed, not perfection. This tendency extends far beyond perception. It shapes the beliefs we adopt, the people we trust, and the stories we tell ourselves. Humans naturally seek patterns, even when none exist. Our ancestors benefited from assuming that rustling grass might hide a predator. Mistaking the wind for danger cost little. Mistaking danger for the wind could cost everything. Over thousands of generations, this cautious bias became deeply embedded in human psychology. The modern world is radically different from the environment in which these instincts evolved. Most of us no longer spend our days avoiding predators or searching for food, yet the ancient machinery remains remarkably unchanged. We still react to uncertainty with anxiety. We still jump to conclusions before gathering complete evidence. We still prefer familiar explanations over uncomfortable ambiguity. This explains why certainty feels so attractive. Certainty reduces mental effort. It creates the comforting illusion that the world is understandable and predictable. Doubt, on the other hand, demands continuous thinking. It requires us to hold multiple possibilities in mind at once, resisting the temptation to settle on an easy answer. The brain naturally resists this because uncertainty consumes energy. Energy conservation has always been one of evolution's priorities. The human brain represents only a small percentage of body weight, yet it consumes a disproportionate share of the body's energy. Every complex decision carries a biological cost. As a result, the The brain constantly looks for shortcuts that simplify reality. Psychologists call these heuristics. They are incredibly useful, allowing us to navigate a complicated world without becoming overwhelmed. But every shortcut comes with a trade-off. The simpler the mental model, the greater the risk that important details will be ignored. This does not mean humans are irrational. On the contrary, our cognitive shortcuts helped build civilizations, invent technologies, and cooperate with strangers on an unprecedented scale. The same brain that misjudges probabilities also created mathematics. The same species that falls for illusions also landed spacecraft on distant planets. Human intelligence is extraordinary precisely because it balances instinct with reflection. The problem arises when instinct operates without examination. The first step toward genuine understanding is recognizing that your own mind is not a neutral observer. It has preferences. It has blind spots. It has evolved biases that once served a practical purpose, but may no longer align with the demands of modern life. Intelligence is not the absence of these biases. Intelligence is becoming aware that they exist. Once you understand this, another surprising question appears. If the brain was shaped primarily for survival rather than objective truth, what determines which ideas become convincing? The answer is not found only in logic. It is found in emotion. Long before a thought becomes a carefully reasoned argument, it begins as a feeling. Every decision you make is influenced by emotional systems that evolved millions of years before language itself. Neuroscience has repeatedly shown that emotion is not the enemy of reason. It is the foundation upon which reasoning is built. Without emotion, the brain struggles to assign value, prioritize options, or make meaningful choices. Imagine touching a hot surface. You do not first construct a logical argument about temperature before pulling your hand away. Your reaction is immediate because emotional and survival systems activate before conscious analysis. This hierarchy was incredibly effective throughout human evolution. Fast emotional responses kept our ancestors alive in situations where careful deliberation would have been fatal. Although the threats around us have changed, the sequence remains largely the same. Emotion arrives first. Explanation follows later. This pattern influences nearly every aspect of human belief. When people encounter new information, they often experience an emotional reaction before evaluating the evidence. If an idea produces fear, relief, pride, or anger, the brain immediately assigns significance to it. Only afterward does conscious reasoning begin constructing explanations that justify the feeling already experienced. This is why two intelligent individuals can examine identical evidence and reach completely different conclusions. The difference often lies not in their ability to reason, but in the emotional frameworks through which they interpret the information. Facts rarely exist in isolation. They enter minds already shaped by memories, expectations, identities, and social experiences. Emotions function as powerful filters. They determine which information captures attention, which details are remembered, and which explanations feel convincing. Fear narrows focus toward potential threats. Hope highlights opportunities. Anger simplifies complex situations by identifying clear enemies. Pride reinforces beliefs connected to personal identity. Each emotional state changes not only how we feel, but how we perceive reality itself. This creates an important paradox. People often believe they reached a conclusion through careful reasoning, when, in reality, reasoning was used primarily to defend a conclusion that emotion had already favored. The brain excels at generating coherent narratives that make our choices appear logical, even when those choices originated elsewhere. Understanding this does not require abandoning emotion. Emotions are essential for human life. They give meaning to relationships, inspire creativity, and motivate action. The challenge is recognizing when emotion becomes mistaken for evidence. Feeling certain does not necessarily mean being correct. Feeling afraid does not necessarily indicate danger. Feeling offended does not automatically prove injustice. Emotional intensity and factual accuracy are independent qualities, yet the brain naturally confuses one for the other. The discipline of critical thinking begins with separating these two experiences. Instead of asking only, "What do I believe?" we must also ask, why does this belief feel so compelling? That question transforms the search for truth from an external investigation into an internal one. It reminds us that the greatest obstacle to understanding the world is often not a lack of good information, but an unexamined mind. One of the most remarkable characteristics of our species is not intelligence alone, nor language alone, nor even the ability to use tools. Many animals communicate. Many animals cooperate. Some even use primitive tools. What separates humans is our extraordinary capacity to cooperate in enormous numbers with individuals we have never met. This ability transformed a vulnerable primate into the dominant force on the planet. If you observe a troop of chimpanzees, cooperation exists, but it has limits. Every individual must personally know the others. Relationships depend on direct experience, dominance, and familiarity. Once the group grows beyond a certain size, cooperation becomes unstable because trust cannot easily extend to strangers. Humans solve this problem in an unusual way. Instead of relying only on personal relationships, we learn to organize ourselves around shared ideas. These ideas cannot be touched or measured like mountains or rivers, yet they shape nearly every aspect of civilization. Think about money. A dollar bill is nothing more than specially printed paper. A digital bank balance is merely information stored on computers. Neither has value because of its physical properties. Their value exists because millions of people simultaneously accept the same belief. Every morning, strangers exchange goods, services, and years of labor for symbols that only function because everyone expects everyone else to trust them. If tomorrow every person suddenly stopped believing in the financial system, the paper would remain exactly the same. The computers would continue storing numbers, yet their meaning would disappear almost instantly. The value never existed inside the object itself. It existed inside a collective agreement. The same principle extends far beyond economics. A corporation cannot be photographed because it is not a physical organism. Buildings exist. Employees exist. Documents exist. Computers exist. But the corporation itself exists only because laws, institutions, investors, customers, and workers continuously recognize the same invisible framework. The same applies to governments, universities, legal systems, citizenship, contracts, and countless other institutions. These are among humanity's greatest inventions precisely because they allow strangers to coordinate their actions across continents and generations. This ability should not be dismissed as mere illusion. Shared beliefs produce real consequences. A constitution may be words on paper, but those words influence armies, courts, elections, and the lives of millions. An agreement exists first in imagination, yet its effects become tangible in the physical world. Human civilization is therefore built upon layers of imagined realities that enable practical cooperation. The word imagined does not mean false. It simply means that these realities exist because human minds continuously sustain them. Language itself demonstrates this principle. Words carry no natural meaning. The sounds themselves are arbitrary. Meaning arises because communities agree upon shared definitions. Every conversation depends on collective imagination. This remarkable capacity gave humanity unprecedented flexibility. Unlike biological evolution, which unfolds across thousands of generations, shared ideas can change almost overnight. A new religion can emerge. A political movement can reshape nations. A scientific theory can transform industry. A legal reform can redefine society. Ideas spread far more rapidly than genes. Yet the same capacity that allows civilizations to flourish also creates profound vulnerabilities. If cooperation depends on shared beliefs, then false beliefs can organize societies just as effectively as accurate ones, at least for a time. History repeatedly demonstrates that enormous populations have devoted themselves to ideas later recognized as deeply mistaken. Entire generations accepted assumptions about race, class, economics, or scientific knowledge that eventually collapsed under closer examination. At each moment, these ideas appeared completely normal because nearly everyone around them accepted them. This reveals something uncomfortable about human psychology. People often mistake popularity for truth. When an idea becomes widely shared, it gains an appearance of inevitability. Agreement creates emotional reassurance. If millions believe something, questioning it begins to feel unreasonable. Yet reality is not determined by majority vote. The earth did not become round when people finally accepted it. Disease was not caused by invisible microorganisms only after scientists discovered bacteria. Reality existed independently of belief. Human understanding simply moved closer to it. Collective agreement is extraordinarily powerful for organizing societies, but it is a poor substitute for evidence. This distinction becomes increasingly important as societies grow more interconnected. Modern technology allows stories to spread at unprecedented speed. A compelling narrative can travel across continents within minutes, influencing millions before careful investigation even begins. The mechanisms of communication have changed dramatically. But the psychology receiving those messages remains remarkably ancient. Our ancestors evolved in relatively small communities where information traveled slowly and often came from trusted individuals. The human mind developed shortcuts for evaluating credibility under those conditions. Today, those same shortcuts encounter a radically different environment. Instead of hearing stories from a few familiar voices, we encounter thousands of messages every day. News, advertisements, opinions, entertainment, rumors, and political arguments compete simultaneously for our limited attention. The result is not simply an information overload. It is an attention economy. Every institution competes for the same finite cognitive resource. Under these conditions, the most successful message is not necessarily the most accurate. It is often the one that is easiest to remember, emotionally engaging, or socially rewarding to repeat. This creates a dangerous feedback loop. Stories that provoke strong reactions receive greater visibility. Greater visibility creates familiarity. Familiarity increases perceived credibility. Perceived credibility encourages further sharing. Soon repetition itself begins replacing verification. The human mind naturally interprets repeated exposure as evidence of reliability, even when repetition originated from coordinated amplification rather than genuine accuracy. Understanding this tendency is essential because our deepest convictions often emerge not through deliberate investigation, but through repeated exposure. The challenge becomes even greater when beliefs intertwine with identity. Human beings rarely define themselves solely as isolated individuals. We belong to families, professions, cultures, nations, religions, and countless communities that provide meaning and stability. These identities help us navigate an extraordinarily complex world. They answer questions about where we belong, whom we trust, and what we value. Identity is therefore not merely psychological decoration. It is one of the brain's most efficient organizational systems. Every identity simplifies decision-making by providing ready-made assumptions about the world. Yet, this efficiency comes at a cost. When beliefs become woven into identity, questioning those beliefs no longer feels like evaluating information. It feels like threatening the self. This explains why disagreement often produces emotional intensity disproportionate to the actual evidence being discussed. Two individuals may begin debating an economic policy, a scientific finding, or a historical interpretation. Very quickly, however, the conversation stops being about evidence. It becomes a struggle over belonging, status, and self-definition. The brain responds accordingly. Neuroscientific research suggests that challenges to deeply held beliefs can activate many of the same emotional systems involved in processing physical threats. The experience is not merely intellectual, it feels personal. This reaction made evolutionary sense. For most of human history, remaining connected to one's community dramatically increased the chances of survival. Isolation often meant vulnerability. As a result, the brain developed strong motivations to maintain social acceptance. Beliefs frequently functioned as signals of group membership. Accepting the same customs, rituals, stories, and moral principles demonstrated loyalty. Shared beliefs strengthened cooperation because they reduced uncertainty within the group. Even today, agreement often produces feelings of safety and belonging that extend beyond the content of the belief itself. This is why changing one's mind can be unexpectedly difficult. Admitting error requires more than updating information. It may require redefining relationships, reconsidering values, and accepting temporary uncertainty. The psychological cost can feel enormous. Consequently, many people unconsciously defend existing beliefs, not because the evidence remains persuasive, but because abandoning them appears emotionally expensive. The mind becomes remarkably creative in protecting consistency. Contradictory evidence may be ignored. Exceptions may receive disproportionate attention. Ambiguous information may be interpreted in ways that preserve existing conclusions. None of this necessarily reflects dishonesty. It reflects the brain's remarkable ability to preserve a coherent identity. This tendency affects everyone, regardless of education or intelligence. Knowledge alone does not eliminate cognitive bias. In some cases, greater intelligence simply provides more sophisticated justifications for conclusions that emotion has already selected. Recognizing this should not lead to cynicism. Instead, it invites intellectual humility. If every human mind possesses these tendencies, then genuine wisdom begins not with assuming our beliefs are correct, but with acknowledging how easily certainty can become detached from reality. Progress in science offers an instructive example. Scientific knowledge advances not because scientists are immune to bias, but because scientific methods are deliberately designed to reduce the influence of individual certainty. Ideas must survive observation, replication, criticism, and continuous revision. No conclusion remains permanently protected from new evidence. This commitment to revision represents one of humanity's greatest intellectual achievements. It recognizes a profound truth about the human condition. The goal is not to become incapable of error. The goal is to build habits that make discovering our errors more likely than preserving them. The modern world presents humanity with a paradox unlike anything our ancestors ever faced. Never before have so many people had access to so much information. At any moment, a device small enough to fit inside a pocket can retrieve centuries of accumulated knowledge, scientific discoveries, historical archives, and expert analysis from almost anywhere on Earth. If information alone were enough to create wisdom, our era should be the wisest in history.